Welcome again, everybody, to this session. This is a moderator discussion, and our topic is assessing the UK's role as a global leader in Islamic finance. And we have two experts in this area who will be joining us, and I'm sure they'll be telling us lots about it. Do welcome on board Bashar Al-Natoor, who is Head of Islamic Finance, Fitch Ratings, and Samina, Akram, Managing Partner, Samak Ethical Finance. Just welcome, colleagues, to this discussion, and it's a pleasure to host you for this.
Hi, it's the pleasure ours.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
A pleasure is mine as well. So let's talk about Islamic finance. Again, there's been lots of interesting things in the news recently. It's not my area of expertise, but I've been learning more as we go along. But you're the experts. I'm sure you're going to be telling us about it. So let's start briefly by giving you a couple of minutes to talk about yourself, your organizations, how you are sort of involved in this area in Islamic finance. And then we'll delve a little bit deeper into of course, why in the UK, Islamic finance in the UK, and of course, what the opportunities are for anyone who's listening or will be watching this presentation later on. So should we start with Samina? If you could just, of course, give us a little bit about your background, your organization, and the role you play here.
Thanks, Ed. Well, first of all, it's a real honor to be joining yourself and Bashir today. So a bit of background myself. I'm a former banker. So worked at the likes of Merrill Lynch, where I was heading their Islamic Finance Wealth Management business. Worked for Deutsche Bank, Emirates MBD, Barclays, so several financial institutions. And then the previous credit crisis, I decided that it was time now to focus on setting up my own consultancy firm. So Samak Ethical Finance, I believe that we're probably one of the first actually I think Bashir will probably know better than me, but I think we're fortunate to kind of entered that market when I think there was quite a strong need for consultancy. I'm also the founder of the world's first forum that's focusing on women empowerment. It's called the Women in Islamic and Ethical Finance Forum. We started with 10 members, and now we have about over 10,000 members. So the forum's aims are obviously women empowerment, but also to create a bridge between the Islamic and the wider ethical market. So again, we were very fortunate that when, a lot of people within the ESG space at the beginning thought these guys were just tree huggers and crazy, people with crazy ideas. And yet now, ESG is being discussed at the most highest standard with central banks and the CEOs of major corporations like JP Morgan. So I feel that we're very blessed actually to have entered this market, at the right time, I guess, and before everyone else kind of jumped on the bandwagon. So thank you again for having me with you.
Wonderful, and I look forward to asking you even more questions. Bashar, if the floor is yours, tell us a little bit about what you do. I mean, I see both of you mentioned in many articles and stuff. So if you could share a little bit about your work and the role you play in this area, I think that would give us a good platform for us to build this discussion upon.
Thank you very much, Ed, and thank you for having me. I am the Global Head of Islamic Finance at Fitch Ratings, which is a cross-group, cross-sector, cross-geography role, where whether it's in the banking side or corporate side or sovereign side or project side, there is an Islamic finance element in it, whether it's an issuance of sukuk, or whether it's an Islamic bank, or whether it's a capital company, or a corporate that operates under Sharia. The group looks into that. I mean, the mandate is really wide, and it covers a lot of ground. We currently rate more than 120 billion outstanding US dollars of sukuk. It's more than 150 issuances. There is more than 36 institutions that are Sharia compliant that we rate, including one that we've rated on Thursday, which is a Sharia compliant bank in the UK. And among others. So the mandate is really wide, and it covers a lot of ground. Before that, I was with the Islamic Development Bank, which is a development bank that works under the principles of Sharia. I've been there in various roles, in the Treasury and in the Risk Management Department, and finally in the Office of the Vice President Finance, overlooking a few departments. So I go back with Islamic finance a long way. Since I've been in Fitch, we have a dedicated criteria that we look at. We interact with different sides of the industry, but as a credit rating agency, as an independent credit rating agency, we have an independent view on what's happening. And I think that is something that is unique by its nature, where it gives us the luxury of being able to assess things as they are and as we see them, which is a big advantage to various stakeholders of this interesting sector.
Fabulous, thank you. So I know Samina mentioned ethical finance, right? So again, what exactly is it, and why are we discussing Islamic finance in sort of the UK conference? And of course, the role London plays. I came across what happened with the Sukuk recently. That was like $500 million or something like this. So yeah, if you just want to explain, maybe let's start with you, Bashar. Explain to us like the sort of the connection with Islamic finance and London, and of course we will talk about opportunities, because people always want to talk about opportunities as well.
Okay, thank you. I think if you want to look at Islamic finance in the UK, you need to identify three key dimensions. There is the first dimension, which is internal, i.e. Islamic finance within the UK and for the UK. The second dimension is the UK as a Western hub, and that is navigating through the Islamic finance industry. And the third one is, I would say, in the soft side, which is non-financial, which is having the powerhouses, the legal houses, the educational houses that harbors that. And in the first dimension, which is related to the UK itself, i.e. Islamic finance in the UK, I would say it's really limited. And the size of that industry is less than 1% of the of the banking industry. However, you have 4+ Islamic banks in the UK. As I said, we've just rated one of them last Thursday. And that is something that is there. And when you look at deeper into that, so the BLME and the banks that we rate, it's actually an investment from an Islamic bank in Kuwait. They put 71% plus of that bank in 2020 in January, and now that bank is owned, and the rating is driven by the support coming from its parents in Kuwait. And the support of that parent is coming from, the rating of that parent is coming from the support of the government of Kuwait to that banking sector. So this is one example where you can see, and okay, this is something that is coming there. And I'm talking about the first dimension. The second dimension is actually the hub status. And there, as you correctly mentioned, this is the second Sukuk that the UK issued. And Sukuk is not the main source of funding for the UK government. This is their only second Sukuk. But there is an intention behind that. You can read that the objective behind that is actually to maintain their status as a Western hub to Islamic finance, because there is now, with the Brexit and what's happening, there is an actual competition, whether coming from Ireland of listing of Sukuk or Luxembourg of having fund managers situated there, and other countries. And the UK and London Exchange specifically, the listing there of Sukuk is really significant. It's one of the key international listing arenas for Islamic finance and Sukuk. The contracts, the syndication contracts and international contracts and the Sukuk, which is the Islamic banks, are actually governed in its majority under English law. The actual language that is used is actually English. The powerhouses that help shape the industry globally, it has a lot of the legal firms that is domiciled in the UK. And the educational side, and I've heard part of the previous panel, is something that is also, it is there where it's really powering the whole industry. So this is the second dimension where you can see this is happening in that side. The third one is, it's on the soft side. So the UK is using and has specifically inclusive policies. And you have a population, significant Muslim population, significant Muslim minority population that you need to bank, you need to have the right education loans for them, you need to have the right pensions for them. And that is something that is failing a little bit, maybe at the back burner. And you can see that there is development, there is attempt, but it's not yet reaching the situation where it is there. So as you can see, the opportunities, whether on an institutional side, whether on funding side. So if you look at the chart, for example, you'll find that part of the funding actually of that is an Islamic finance transaction. You mentioned the sukuk, I've mentioned banks. It is everywhere. And it's a significant part because, and this is the last point on this, because Islamic finance industry in the GCC is significant. If you look at financing in Saudi Arabia, 82% of bank financing is Islamic finance. 42% of Kuwait banking sector is Islamic banks. 37% of Bahrain is Islamic banks. If you look at the UAE and Qatar, you're going to be talking about 27, 29, or 30%, depending on the deposits or the funding side. So it's part of the DNA of the GCC. And if you're dealing with the GCC in general, you'll be faced on one form or another of an Islamic finance or a Sharia compliant aspect of that.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Samina, let's come to you on this one. So has Brexit sort of impacted this area at all? And again, I mean, what are the main areas being invested in at the moment? Would that be education, technology? What's happening? Give us a bit of an insight into what's happening currently.
Sure. Well, what we're hearing from our clients, Brexit has hardly any impact on their business. And I think that's because London itself is such a strong financial, player. That as Bashir kind of mentioned, we have the best legal infrastructure. The government support that has just been outstanding in promoting the City of London and Islamic finance, to the global world. We've here at Samak Ethical Finance, we've actually accompanied several Lord Mayors overseas as part of their international delegations. And, Islamic finance was one of the key areas that they would always highlight at the most highest standards. So to me, I feel actually, quite honoured to be in London and all the work that I see that the UK government does. As a Muslim as well, often, I kind of find that actually maybe they're kind of promoting Islamic finance more even than even some of the Islamic countries. In terms of Brexit, we're kind of hearing that, it's really not had any impact at all. The pandemic itself, I think, has actually opened up the value proposition of Islamic finance considerably. This COVID has really made a lot of organizations think about how they're dealing with the planet and with, the human as well. So mental health is really a big cause now. A lot of financial institutions are focused on. I think they've kind of learned that organizations haven't always been focusing, on the right direction. And now the principles of ESG, they're taking it very, very seriously. Just through our work with WIFS, over the past year or so, we've had considerable amount of attention and focus coming in from particularly the finance universe here in London, but globally as well. And again, we have an application form, and one of the questions is what attracts you to the Islamic ethical universe. And I think people have had enough. The previous crisis exposed the casino tribe, kind of gambling, speculation type of culture that was out there. A lot of good people lost money. And, that kind of ethical, moral dimension of Islamic ethical finance is really, appealing to people. And the stats are showing this, the research is showing this. It's really the millennials, the younger generation, they want no part to play now in hurting the environment. They're standing for climate change. They want to end poverty. They're concerned about human rights violations. So, just look at the US, the Black Lives Matter movement, how that's filtering in to every part, from sports to finance to every, kind of industry. And I feel, again, blessed to be really working in an industry that's at the forefront of impact, change. And, to me, for WIFF, again, kind of seeing that it's the younger generation, it's the women that are really behind this change. And it's a real honor to be in this space.
Fabulous. Bashar, let's get your views on the connection between Islamic finance and ESG as well. I find that particularly interesting. I don't know too much about it, but I believe I'm learning more as we continue our discussions.
I think, many would hear, I usually say that Islamic finance is actually a form of ethical finance, ESG sort of related, that is adopted by Sharia-sensitive population, which is a significant population of Earth. Not all of them are Sharia-sensitive, but the sensitivity differs, and you're talking about almost the quarter of the population. So the industry started in its modern form almost more than 40 years back, but it goes back to the beginning of actually Islam. Now that form of industry came at the back of the need to have the ability of traders to trade in a Sharia compliant way between themselves and with others, because the trading was a significant part of that. And it started to have shape and form at the back of something that they saw on the conventional side. And they tried to actually take that. Now, with the ESG emergence, there was a time where, in the recent few years, where the industry was faced of the question as, okay, are you going to continue in your path as just Islamic finance, or you're going to be adopting some of the initiatives that is more on the environmental side, because the social side is part of the DNA of Islamic finance. So the charity, the zakah, the sadaqah, the waqf is actually there. Profit and loss sharing is actually there. How it's implemented, to what extent, that's another story, but at least in principle, it's there. What is added recently is actually the ESG side. And we saw, specifically in the GCC in the past few years, for example, when there is an actual issuance of an Islamic bond, and there was a choice to do an ESG related, whether green, sustainable, transitional, it was always on the top of the sukuk rather than a bond. It is a very important point to note, because it is the targeted audience of that is actually widening the investor base. So Islamic instruments and Islamic finance in general, it's actually an inclusive instrument. It includes the broader perspective. So it does not exclude the conventional. You can actually participate if you're happy with the return and risk story, but it includes the Sharia sensitive that cannot do and invest in the conventional side. And that's a very important thing. So there is a crisscross between Islamic finance and ESG in various parts, but it's not the same. Because if you're looking at the environment, not all sukuk are Sharia compliant, or Sharia compliant are environmental sensitive. Islamic banks, we differentiate them in terms of scoring when it comes to ESG. But there is a starting point where you start from a pool of activities or a pool of assets where you can build on. And this is something that we started seeing in the past few years, and a trend that is really growing significantly, whether on the issuance side or a transaction side or financing side, but it is held back by the early development stage of ESG in general in the GCC. That is not the case in the UK. And that's, I think, an advantage of having the know-how and having the investor that are interested in ESG in the UK coming into the GCC. So there is a point there that you need to look at. The other side of the equation is, how fast is this going to go? How far is this going to go? I think the story is still at its beginning, and it's an interesting story to watch and see how this is evolving.
And do we foresee the UK continuing to be the leader outside the GCC in this area? Samina, what are the prospects going for the future? Of course, benefiting both regions, both the UK and, of course, the GCC. Is this a trend that's going to continue?
I think so. I think, since Brexit, we've seen that the UK government is very keen now to start re-establishing their relationships with other parts of the world. So we're seeing more and more interesting things happening with the UK and the GCC. And other sort of places like Malaysia, there's other collaborations and things that are really in the horizon and happening. So I think Islamic finance is only going to increase its value proposition. I think the only thing that really is holding the industry back is, as Bashar mentioned, is lack of knowledge and understanding. So to me, when I was working at these investment banks, even, I mean, I was lucky that eventually my passion for Islamic finance ended up having a role within Merrill's. But previously, when I was working for other organizations, it was very difficult to kind of get involved in this industry. And I think the big thing that was holding a lot of the organization back was lack of understanding and lack of knowledge. So this is why around sort of 2008-9, I decided to do something about it. And, my kind of mission out there in the world was to educate the financial markets on Islamic finance. And I think the unique thing that we've done at WIFF, we have obviously we've got a lot of the major institutions within Islamic finance that have endorsed us, that are supporting us, but we've also captured a lot of the mainstream financial markets as well. So we've done works, with the likes of ING and other kind of banks and players. I remember once we did an event it was International Women's Day, and we had 5 very senior female bankers from the likes of Deutsche Bank and Coutts and all these kind of places. And the keynote speaker was the head of Islamic finance for the World Bank. And I remember when we said that, we're doing this just, an inspirational type, careers type event. And some of the ladies that I went to within the mainstream financial bank said to me, we know nothing about Islamic finance, and we're not that ethical either, Samina. So why are we on this? And I said, no, just come, tell us your stories, they inspire us. And when these guys came and they saw this Nigerian Christian, heading up the World Bank's Islamic finance practice and speaking so passionately. A year later, one of the bankers called me and said, listen, we're kind of going strong now in the Saudi market. We're looking at Islamic finance and, let's have a conversation. So I think it's, when you're trying to wake something up, you're trying to introduce new concepts they don't necessarily understand. It can always be quite difficult. And, let's be honest, Islam doesn't always have the right kind of media attention out there either. And, the FCA here, the regulators have been brilliant. When they started regulating the Islamic finance industry, they said, listen, no special favors. We're going to regulate you like we're going to regulate, any of the mainstream financial institutions. And what's the shame? I think the shame is that Islamic finance gives an additional layer of protection to institutions because, you've got the Sharia board, you've got the scholars, so you've got, your own internal compliance and various teams. And then you've got the scholars that are kind of like coming in quite hard. I know in one bank here in the UK, the scholars were reporting into a sales team, and then eventually, they kind of stopped reporting into them because there was always a clash on the scholars kind of saying this isn't Sharia compliant, but the sales guys said we don't really care. And so that extra kind of conscious, that extra are we going towards the right dimension, that right direction? I think Islamic finance kind of has that.
Hi, Samina. Okay, I'm sure our audience after this, they will not have a, if you like, a lack of knowledge anyway. If you yourself and Bashar make yourself available to them in our virtual platform, so they can direct any questions to you. Bashar, let's end up with you because I think we've sort of run out of time. If you do have any closing remarks, let us know. And of course, your insights here have both been very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, and I heard what Samina said and what you said. I think the UK has a unique proposition when it comes to Islamic finance, specifically as a hub for the West, for listing the powerhouses on the legal side and financial institution side. But I think there is a competition that is coming on the way. It started actually with the Brexit. Ireland is also now attracting a lot of listing of sukuk. Luxembourg is there. So, and I can see that this is something that worth watching and worth having a look at. The other side of it, which is dealing with the GCC, I think as I said at the beginning, if I am to give anyone a takeaway, the first question you asked, why are we discussing Islamic finance in the UK and GCC? I think they need to understand who they're dealing with, and they need to understand that the Islamic finance industry is a significant part of this texture and DNA of the GCC, whether on the funding side, whether on the investment side, whether on the issuance side, whether on the consumer side, whether. So wherever you look, there is an element there. And if you want to attract the wider audience and stakeholders, you need to consider and understand where is that, who you're dealing with, and how is that Islamic finance. And we can see the evidence of that even on the government side, which does not have an agenda to be and develop Islamic finance, as Samina said, but what they provided is an equal opportunity for the Islamic finance industry to operate within the UK. And that's a significant thing. Having the right legal structure to allow these banks, whether coming from an investment, coming from the GCC to build a bank or buy a bank there and operate there and put their brand being Sharia compliant, is an important step. Let's see how this space is evolving, understand who you're dealing with, and have at the back of your mind that Islamic finance is a significant part of the DNA of the GCC specifically, and something that you need to consider and have a basic understanding when it comes to dealing with these countries.
Thank you. Actually, there's a couple of questions from our audience. So if I can just quickly ask them, and this is from Alicia Bulla, UK editor of Arabian News, the world's largest Sharia-compliant, tech-focused private equity fund by UK-based Ethos Invest was launched today. Is this a landmark for Islamic finance? Let's go with, who would like to answer this question?
I mean, I'm happy to quickly say, fintech in general, and Islamic and Sharia-compliant fintech in the UK is something that we've noticed being on the rise there. Now, is that a significant part of the global Islamic finance industry? I would say no. But is it a significant part of the Islamic fintech industry? I would say yes. It's leading because it is built on a very advanced infrastructure compared to many of the countries in the GCC and even in Malaysia and other countries. So it is giving the advantage of having a platform, an Islamic platform, on top of a very advanced infrastructure when it comes to fintech. How successful is that? What direction is that going? Is this a trend that we're going to be seeing it continue? Is something that is not yet clear, but it's definitely an interesting trend to watch.
Wonderful. And then the final question would be, do you see Gulf Islamic banks entering the UK retail market? Will that go to you, Samina? And just very briefly for us to close this discussion.
I think the retail space needs a lot of development. There's not enough Islamic mortgage products out there. There's not enough pensions out there. There's not enough, even on the student loan side, nearly every university I speak that they're crying out for Sharia compliant loans. There's a lot of work to be done. And I just feel that the market's not competitive enough. And, this is really, I think, my and Bashir's message that the UK is open and the opportunities are here, but it's an underdeveloped market. And I don't think people are really understanding what major opportunities lie ahead. The amount of, even just in my family, constantly, people don't actually understand what I do. So when I say Islamic finance, it's like, okay, do you know anyone who can help us out with an Islamic mortgage? And so you can just see that, the demand's there. But I think what's happening is it's not being it's not going to the right people in authority. I remember once I attended a conference and it was a CEO of quite a major Canadian bank. And someone asked about Islamic finance and he said, I've got so many Muhammads on my database and not one of them has asked for it. But that's not the story I hear. So to the retail players out there, Bashir, we need to convince them, come to London.
Yeah. I think awareness and confidence are key limitation to the industry, not only in the UK, in many other countries. So awareness, and even if you're aware, you need to have confidence that this is the right proposition. So these two limitations are clear in many jurisdictions, including the UK.
Wonderful. Bashar and Samina, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. It's been great having you, and hopefully our audience have picked up a lot from you as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.